There's a reason Pixar's new movie Soul made all of us 20-something-year-olds cry about the tragedy that is our life, and had our young nieces and nephews confused about its open-ended ending. But it's a good thing that this movie is attacking our lives from so many angles. No, for real, hear me out. Because it forces us to look at our lives and ask ourselves some important questions like, am I happy with my life? What is my purpose? Am I living a good life? And if not, why? So welcome to this episode where we'll discuss the philosophy embedded into Pixar's Soul and why the unexamined life is not worth living. But first, a quick recap. So if you haven't watched it yet, go watch it first, then come back here. In Soul, we follow Joe, a middle-aged aspiring jazz musician that teaches music on the side while he waits for his big break. Well, Joe finally manages to get the chance that he's been waiting for, but he unexpectedly dies and gets transported to the afterlife. Not ready to accept death, Joe escapes to the great before, an area where souls get ready for life on Earth. There, he meets 22, a soul that doesn't want to live and has been avoiding life on Earth for centuries. So Joe concocts a plan to mentor 22 so she can find her spark and that he can take her Earth pass and get back to Earth. And throughout this mentoring process, Joe shows 22 his life, hoping that it's going to inspire her to get her spark. But upon examining his life, he realizes how unfulfilling and disappointing his life on Earth was. And this revelation only makes him more determined to get back to his life. At this point in the film, Joe's mindset represents a view in philosophy called Essentialism. And one aspect of Essentialism is that all people have an essence, and everything is born with a purpose. Everyone's essence gives their life purpose, and whether or not they're good at that purpose, it is what they are meant to do. This is the same view on life that Joe has for the majority of the film, because on more than one occasion, Joe says things such as,
"My only purpose on this planet is to play. And that's why I became a jazz musician."
Which is why when Joe looks back on his life, he's disappointed because he believes that he hasn't fulfilled his purpose yet. Joe's view of life doesn't change from essentialism until he gets to see 22 experience life. One interaction that started this change was 22's conversation with Dez, the Existential Barber. In their conversation, Dez reveals to Joe and 22 that he never actually wanted to be a barber. He actually wanted to be a marine biologist. But because of life, he ended up being a barber. Now, Dez's story makes 22 assume that he is not happy with his life because he wasn't able to follow his essence, which he thought was marine biology at the time. But Dez states that he is actually happy with the way his life is because he likes cutting people's hair.
Get to meet interesting folks like you, make them happy, and make them handsome.
What Dez represents here is a belief in philosophy called existentialism. Existentialism is the belief that anything can give your life meaning or purpose. It all depends on what value you give to those things in your life. So this means that anything can give your life purpose or nothing can give your life purpose. This view is opposite from essentialism, because to existentialism, you are born with no purpose, and you must find the meaning in your life yourself, which is exactly what Dez did, because even though he wanted to be a marine biologist, he found value in being a barber and was happy with it. Now, being a barber may or may not be Dez's life purpose, but that's not up for us to decide, because his job is not the only place he can derive purpose for his life. Purpose can come from any aspect of a person's life, such as their family or hobbies. It all depends on how they value it, and this mindset is where Joe is heading throughout the movie. Joe's view on life doesn't mirror existentialism until he has achieved his dream, and he's reflecting on the amazing performance that he and the jazz band just put on. It's during this reflection that Joe notices something is missing in the whole experience. When Joe expresses these concerns to the leader of the band, she tells him this.
"I heard this story about a fish. He swims up to this older fish and says, 'I'm trying to find this thing they call the ocean.' 'The ocean?' says the older fish. 'That's what you're in right now.' 'This?' says the young fish. 'This is water. What I want is the ocean.'"
Basically, you've been chasing this dream for so long, you haven't been present to the life around you. And then she leaves Joe standing on the corner. Because Joe has been so hyper-focused and busy trying to get his big break, he hasn't taken the time to look around him and experience life. Which is why the first thing that he says is, "What's next?" He doesn't say, "Wow, that was a great show," or "Man, that was the best show that I've played." He's constantly looking for the next thing to do, and he hasn't taken the time to take in this wonderful moment. So that's exactly what Joe does when he gets home and sits silently at his piano. He reminisces on his day with 22, finally being able to experience seeing her enjoying life and having fun. Joe also reflects on his life again, but this time we get a whole new version of his Hall of View. He's finally reached existentialism. In this new Hall of View, we see some of the same mundane memories from the previous Hall of View, but this time Joe sees them in a different light, with Joe appreciating and valuing each of the little moments that he once called meaningless. Joe is now starting to represent the view of existentialism because his value for life is starting to come from memories like spending time with his family, teaching music, experiencing life in his city, not from being a successful jazz musician. This new realization allows Joe to give up his life so that 22 can have a chance at life on Earth. And Joe's not able to give up his life for 22 so that she can live hers because he's ready to go. He's able to give up his life because he is happier with his life now than he was before, whereas before he was uncontent with leaving it how it ended. Many believe that Joe's spark should have actually been teaching because of the many teaching moments that he had with his band students like Connie or Curly, and even 22. But doing that would undercut the meaning of the film, which is to be present to things in your life and to value your life off of other things, not just what you believe is your passion. But what many forget is that a person's spark is not their reason for living, but it's what gets them ready, is what inspires them to live on Earth. So just like we learned throughout the movie with Joe, it doesn't really matter what your spark or your essence is. It only matters what you determine has value in your life. This is why it doesn't really matter what Joe's spark is or what 22's spark is, because life on Earth is more than someone's spark. And while you can have a passion, that passion isn't meant to be the focal point of your life or your reason for living, which is why this concept of existentialism elevates the open-ended ending of the movie. Because even though we don't know what Joe will do with his life, we know that he'll now start to value each and every moment of it. Because we can only imagine what Joe will value in his second chance of life. Maybe he does take teaching more seriously and take a full-time job. Maybe he continues searching for his big break in jazz. Maybe he'll ask Dez to grab a beer with him. And maybe he'll finally call up Lisa. Well, thanks to the ending, nobody really knows. But if he turns out anything like Dez, I would say that he's doing just alright. Don't forget, nothing has purpose unless you want it to have purpose. And everybody should be like Dez, the Existential Barber. Peace!